You know, when we talk about bullying, most people imagine teasing, a few harsh words, maybe a shove in the hallway. But what if I told you that some of those school bullies didn't stop at name calling? They went on to ruin lives, and in some cases, commit actual crimes. It's easy to brush off cruelty as kids being kids. Teachers say it, parents repeat it, but that simple phrase hides a darker truth. Some kids grow up carrying emotional scars so deep, they never fully heal. And others, they never stop being bullies. They just learn how to hide it better. These aren't the lighthearted, remember when stories. They're confessions, recollections, and warnings from people who lived through something far worse than typical school drama. Stories where humiliation turned into obsession, where just a prank spiraled into trauma. Each of these stories pulls back the curtain on what really happens when cruelty goes unchecked, when no one steps in, when no one listens, and when bullies realize they can get away with almost anything. Before we begin, let me ask you this. When does bullying stop being just kids being kids and become something truly dangerous? Stay with me, because these stories will shock you. You'll hear about schools that look the other way, victims who found the courage to speak up years later, and the chilling moment when a simple act of meanness crossed the line into something criminal. By the end, you might never look at the word bully the same way again. If you've ever witnessed bullying that went too far, drop a comment below. Your story might help someone else. And make sure you're subscribed, because this gets intense. Some bullies don't stop at words. They use fists, rage, and intimidation to make a statement. And for a few, that statement ends with blood on the floor and sirens in the distance. These are the stories of students who cross a line, not just into cruelty, but into outright violence. It started with a hallway confrontation that everyone thought was just another scuffle. One student slammed another's head against the metal lockers, once, twice, again, until blood streaked down the silver surface. The sound echoed down the hallway like a drumbeat of horror. Teachers rushed in, kids screamed, and in seconds the fight was over. But the damage wasn't. The victim left in an ambulance, and the attacker was expelled before the day ended. Juvenile hall came next. What was supposed to be a show of dominance became a criminal assault charge. Then there was a prank that went horribly wrong. A group of students thought it would be funny to shove a classmate down the stairwell, not realizing a broken glass bottle had shattered at the bottom just minutes earlier. The boy landed hard, screaming, as shards sliced through his palms and knees. Panic set in. The bullies ran. When teachers found him, there was blood everywhere. What they called a joke was treated by police as what it truly was, an act of reckless endangerment. And then there was a quiet one, the so-called nice guy everyone liked. Every morning, he'd get hit on his way to class. Books knocked out his hands, shoulders shoved into lockers, smirks and laughter following behind. It went on for months until one day his friends had enough. They formed a human wall, standing between him and his tormentors. The bullies backed off that day, not because they felt guilt, but because, for the first time, someone stood up. These incidents weren't playground fights. They were assaults, pure and simple. The victims needed stitches, hospital visits, and therapy. The bullies needed police intervention. Each story reminds us that violence doesn't suddenly appear in adulthood. It starts young, often in hallways and locker rooms, and grows when no one calls it what it is, a crime. But physical violence wasn't the only way bullies went too far. Some used psychological tactics that were equally devastating. Not every scar is visible. Some bullies never throw a punch. They use words, rumors, and manipulation that cut far deeper than fists ever could. In today's world, the cruelty doesn't stop in the hallways. It follows victims home, lives in their phones, and plays on repeat for everyone to see. There was one girl who thought mocking a classmate's trauma was entertainment. When a fellow student confided that she'd been assaulted, the bully smirked and said, "I bet you liked it." Those 5 words spread like wildfire. Within days, the victim's pain became a school-wide joke, whispered in hallways, laughed about in group chats. The school's counseling office tried to intervene, but the damage was done. You can treat a bruise, but how do you heal humiliation that the entire school helped spread? Then came the students who made cruelty viral. They'd film fights, taunts, and harassment, uploading the clips for likes and laughs. One video showed a crying student being surrounded, shoved, and mocked. Instead of helping, classmates shouted, "World Star," while recording. For the victim, the bruises healed. The video didn't. It lingered online, a permanent reminder that pain can be content if the audience is cruel enough. One of the most devastating stories came from an 8th grade class where a girl's private nude photo was leaked. What started with one person forwarding an image became a full-on public humiliation campaign. Screenshots, whispers, fake accounts. It spread like wildfire. Teachers suspended students. But it didn't matter. The entire class had participated. Years later, the victim said it felt like she never escaped 8th grade. The shame followed her everywhere she went. And then there were the popular kids who crossed into something unthinkable. When a socially isolated classmate passed away, they pretended to be devastated. Not because they cared, but because attending the funeral meant skipping a test. They posted fake grief online, complete with emojis and hashtags. For those who truly knew the victim, it was salt in a wound that would never fully close. Emotional cruelty doesn't always leave bruises, but it leaves memories that haunt. These victims carry anxiety, mistrust, and trauma for years, all because someone decided their suffering was entertainment. If you think that's disturbing, wait until you hear about the bullies who targeted the most vulnerable students. There's a special kind of cruelty reserved for those who can't fight back. Some bullies don't just want to feel powerful. They want to crush anyone weaker, anyone different, anyone already struggling. These next stories aren't just about bullying, they're about inhumanity. It started with a girl in a wheelchair, someone who was known around school for her kindness and constant smile. One day, during lunch, a group of students thought it'd be funny to steal her wheelchair and leave her stranded in the cafeteria. They rolled it down the hallway laughing, while she sat helpless, humiliated, and terrified. But for once, the school didn't stay silent. Dozens of students demanded justice, staging a walkout until the culprits were punished. It was a rare moment where compassion outshined cruelty, but it shouldn't have taken something so cruel to make people care. Then there was Brian, a student with Down syndrome, who just wanted to be part of the crowd. One afternoon, some older kids surrounded him by the lockers, pushed him down, and held him there until he cried. They laughed as he begged them to stop. When teachers found out, the bullies were suspended, but the damage ran deeper than any punishment could fix. Brian stopped coming to school for weeks. For him, that hallway wasn't just a place to walk. It became a memory of helplessness. Another story spread online like wildfire. An autistic student who was cornered in the locker room. His tormentor smeared feces on his shirt while recording it for laughs. In shock and panic, the boy bit one of them, hard enough to take off the tip of a finger. That's what it took for the school to finally act. A moment of primal defense from a kid who had endured more than anyone should. But it doesn't stop there. In another school, a freshman wrestler was cornered in the showers. A group of teammates urinated on him as a hazing ritual. He didn't tell anyone for months, too ashamed to speak up. When the truth came out, the school tried to downplay it, calling it locker room behavior. It wasn't. It was abuse. And perhaps the cruelest story of all, a girl who had just finished chemotherapy, proud to finally have her hair growing back. One afternoon, someone lit a lighter behind her, trying to set her hair on fire. Teachers stopped it before it caught, but the intent was clear: to laugh at her pain, to destroy the little bit of confidence she'd just begun to rebuild. These stories expose a darkness that's hard to comprehend, the kind that targets the sick, the disabled, the defenseless. It's not about jokes or kids being kids. It's about cruelty for entertainment, and that's something far worse. These stories show how low some bullies will go. But sadly, some incidents had even more tragic outcomes. For some, bullying doesn't end when the school bell rings. The trauma lingers, festers, and sometimes it destroys lives completely. These stories show how unchecked cruelty can lead to irreversible tragedy for both the victims and the bullies themselves. There was a quiet student who endured relentless torment, taunts about their appearance, whispers in class, cruel posts online that never stopped. Teachers brushed it off, parents tried to help, but the damage was done. One morning, the student didn't show up for school. The news spread quickly. They had taken their own life. The community mourned. The school held assemblies, but behind the tears was a haunting question. Who was responsible? In the eyes of the law, no one could be charged. But morally, everyone who stayed silent played a part. Then came the story that chilled everyone who heard it. A girl known for bullying others in middle school, verbal abuse, physical intimidation, social humiliation, grew up to commit an unthinkable crime. Years later, she murdered her own mother and sister in a fit of rage. Neighbors described her as troubled and always angry. Psychologists later noted that patterns of cruelty and control often start young and escalate when never confronted. Another case involved a group of middle school bullies who carried their behavior straight into high school. What started as locker shoves and after-school taunts became something darker. In 9th grade, they beat a classmate in an alleyway after a party. And this time, the victim didn't survive. The ringleader was sentenced to years in prison. A childhood of unchecked aggression ended in tragedy for everyone involved. And then there was a bully everyone feared, racist, violent, always pushing the limits. He mocked, he hit, he threatened. Teachers saw it, but nothing stuck long enough to stop him. Years later, he died in a drunk driving accident, taking 2 innocent lives with him. His story became a grim reminder that cruelty doesn't disappear. It just finds new targets. These stories reveal a painful truth. Bullying isn't harmless. It's often the seed of something much darker: depression, violence, destruction. And when ignored, it grows until it's too late to stop. Not every story ends in tragedy, though. Some victims found justice, and some bystanders became heroes. For all the darkness in these stories, there were moments, rare but powerful, when justice finally hit back, when the victims or their friends stood up, and for once, the bullies got exactly what they deserved. One of the most satisfying stories came from a high school wrestler. He never forgot the day his older teammates humiliated a freshman by urinating on him in the showers. Years later, those same bullies ended up on the mat with him during practice. Coach told me to drill hard. He said, so I did. Every takedown, every slam was payback, not out of cruelty, but justice. Most satisfying thing I ever done, he admitted, without a hint of regret. Sometimes karma wears a wrestling singlet. Then there was a boy who stood up for Brian, the student with Down syndrome who'd been bullied near the lockers. When the tormentors pushed Brian again, his friend snapped, shoving one of them so hard he hit the floor. The school suspended him for fighting, but his mom had a different take. She said, "You defended someone who couldn't defend himself," and rewarded him with a vacation and a brand new GameCube. Sometimes being punished by the school doesn't mean you were wrong. It means you had a spine. Another story told a group of friends who got tired of watching their quiet buddy, the nice guy, get shoved and mocked every day. One afternoon, they cornered the main bully and made it clear, one more shove, and he'd regret it. The bullying stopped immediately. Sometimes, the threat of justice is enough to end cruelty. And who could forget the weird kid, the one everyone underestimated, who bit his bully hard enough to send him to the hospital? The principal didn't even punish him. He simply said he got what he deserved. These moments remind us that courage doesn't always come from authority figures. It often comes from students who refuse to stay silent. These stories of standing up to bullies are inspiring. But what about the schools themselves? How do they handle these situations? For every story of justice served, there are dozens more where institutions, the very systems meant to protect students, chose silence instead. Schools, teachers, and administrators often fail not because they don't know what's happening, but because acknowledging it would mean admitting responsibility. Take the schools that try to cover up sexual assaults to protect their reputation. In one case, a student reported being assaulted by a classmate, and instead of calling the police, the administration told her to keep it quiet while they handled it internally. Their main concern wasn't her trauma, but the school's image. When parents demanded answers, the principal used vague words like incident and miscommunication. Behind closed doors, it was a cover-up, plain and simple. Then there are the teachers who were selectively oblivious. The ones who saw the bullying happen daily. The shoves, the cruel jokes, the humiliation, but chose to look the other way because it was too much trouble to report. Some even joked with the bullies, reinforcing the hierarchy instead of challenging it. For the victims, That silence was betrayal disguised as authority. And what about the popular or wealthy students? The ones with influential parents? Time and again, they got away with racism, violence, and even assault because of who their families were. Teachers whispered, "It's not worth it," while administrators quietly adjusted punishments to protect the school's relationship with the community. Privilege became a shield, and justice became optional. Schools love to brag about zero-tolerance policies, but those slogans rarely survive real-world application. On paper, every act of bullying is punishable. In practice, enforcement depends on who you are and who your parents know. Especially in small towns, everyone knows everyone. The superintendent plays golf with the bully's dad. The teacher doesn't want to make waves. The result? Victims are told to move on while their abusers walk free, emboldened by a system that values reputation over responsibility. These institutional failures don't just allow bullying, they breed it. When cruelty has no consequences, it becomes culture. So, what can we learn from all of this? Let's wrap up with some important takeaways. When you look back at all these stories, one truth becomes painfully clear. Bullying isn't just a single type of behavior. It exists on a spectrum. It can start with teasing or exclusion, but when left unchecked, it can spiral into something criminal, assault, harassment, or even worse. These aren't just schoolyard problems. They're warning signs of deeper violence and neglect. Every one of these stories shares a common thread. Someone should have stepped in sooner. Whether the teacher who looked away, a classmate who stayed silent, or an administration that prioritized image over integrity, intervention could have changed everything. Early action matters. Silence doesn't protect anyone. It only empowers cruelty. But amid all the darkness, there's hope. Many victims went on to live successful, fulfilling lives. Some found healing through therapy, advocacy, or by helping others survive what they went through. Their resilience proves that trauma doesn't define you, how you rise after it does. And it's important to remember that even some bullies came from broken homes or carried pain of their own. That context can help us understand why people act cruelly, but it never excuses it. Accountability and empathy can coexist. If these stories teach us anything, it's that bystanders hold incredible power. A single person who steps in, reports abuse, or stands beside a victim can change the entire outcome. Because when cruelty becomes normalized, kindness becomes an act of rebellion. Early intervention saves lives. Schools must take real responsibility. Peers who speak up can stop abuse. Some behaviors aren't bullying, they're crimes. Victims deserve safety, justice, and compassion. If you or someone you know is experiencing bullying, please reach out to a trusted adult or contact your local helpline. You're not alone. What's your take on how schools should handle extreme bullying? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more real stories like these. Thanks for watching, and remember, be kind to each other.